1. When my second year of university rolled around, I was living with 3 other friends in a property rented through a letting agency, which had a ridiculous pun for a name, but go off. And the house initially was perfectly fine. We moved in at the beginning of August and had no problems for a while. When they asked early on if we wanted to sign a contract for the next year, we said sure, and signed a new contract in November, due to start the next academic year. We know this was a fuck-up in hindsight, but we really didn't think we'd have serious issues. However, when it started getting colder in winter months after mid-autumn, we realized that our boiler was absolutely god-awful. It would fail about once a week, barely heat the radiators, and wouldn't heat rooms, and would need repressurizing each time it died. Being students and not too wise about renting, we just put up with this at first, dutifully emailing the agents every time it broke and waiting for them to send someone out. In the meantime, the busted boiler meant that the hot water was dodgy, sometimes cutting out, and that the house was freezing. And as such, the monthly utility bills were through the roof. One was almost 1.5 times that month's rent. Since the boiler was essentially now a very expensive kettle and we needed office heaters on almost constantly, so we didn't get frostbite, we could constantly see our breath and practically needed to be fully dressed to sleep. This caused issues, constant colds for one guy, mold growing in the bathroom since we didn't ventilate well as to not lose the little heat the house retained, and being unable to dry our clothes. We didn't have a tumble dryer, just a clothes horse. We were fed up and decided we wanted out of the new contract. Because we went through an agency, we didn't have direct contact with the landlord. Every query and contact was through the agents. This is important to remember for later. The agents, while very polite over the phone and in person, were flaky and bad at fixing problems, and it took months for them to send a gas man over. And even then it was just to renew safety certs, and he didn't even do his job right. So a couple weeks later, another guy called out, and we broke it again. The landlord even comes for a visit to make sure there are no more fuck-ups, and this is our first time meeting her. She was a bit of a soccer mum type, but she seemed to be sorting it. And the issue was kinda fixed, as well as an ancient boiler that really needed replacing could be fixed. This was the last time we talked to them directly. Through this whole process, my parents had been helping us document things, my mum being a solicitor and my dad being a landlord himself, so they knew their stuff. They were grumbling about the agents from the start, but for us it was easier to just put up with most of the BS, since uni work was stressful enough without all this. Taking the offhand advice given to us by the agents at the beginning of the tenancy, we kept great records and pictures of every document, email, and letters we received, and took pictures of problems and work being carried out for record keeping. We eventually figured they'd try and shaft us in some form sooner or later, so evidence was needed. We emailed them over the break, officially saying we wanted out of next year's tenancy. They were amiable, and said that if we could get someone else to take it, sure, but they were very adamant that if we didn't, we had to keep paying rent for that contract. We have house viewings and we advertise for months, but we get nowhere. At this point, tensions are rising and my mum has taken our challenge as a personal hobby to sort out legally. Since we had initially tried to be low-maintenance tenants and deal with small issues, our contract stated that any issues related to the property needed to be sorted by the landlords or the agents, in case we caused further damage trying to do repairs. We instead decided to do exactly what our contract said. We emailed them constantly about every tiny issue we had, from a broken light bulb to a frosty letter flap. We knew our contracts front to back, the local laws around renting, and asked the uni about student renting for a specific detail. Getting permission to change a light bulb became a bit of an inside joke to us at this point. How many working days is it going to take to change it this time? 3 to 5 is Friday night. We then made sure we complied with every single thing they asked us to do in order to leave this new contract. Like advertise, accommodate all viewings, keep them updated about anyone who was interested, etc. We went above and beyond trying to get some poor suckers to take this house off our hands. We emailed constantly through this for a paper trail. Made sure we could document this entire thing. It was stressful, but my parents assured us that things would work out, and knowing we were annoying them as much as they annoyed us helped. We then move out at the end of the first tenancy, and hand our keys in with explicit letters saying we were not returning for the next contract. We waited for shit to hit the fan. A few weeks later, while I'm on holiday, we all get emails, forwarded from the landlord via the agents, saying that unless we immediately found new tenants or agreed to stay on, they'd sue us. Scare tactics, pretty much. This was also the first time we'd had an email directly forwarded from the landlord, since usually the agents just passed on any info, etc. in their own words. The landlord said they had no notification saying we wanted out of the new tenancy, that this was out of the blue and therefore they weren't able to advertise for new tenants. So we dutifully sent them a large email with screenshots and pictures of email notifications of house viewings, emails about potential takers, the original emails about us not wanting to take the contract with the date 6 months beforehand clearly highlighted, and waited. After a quiet period, we got an almost sullen-sounding email saying that they would drop it if we paid 4 months' rent from the new contract. Since although there was an error in communication, we still did not fulfill our end and provide replacement tenants. So out rolls another long email with photos of everything the agents had fucked up, including the dodgy gasman visit. Came to learn that what he did was illegal and potentially dangerous, and it was the agent's job to make sure he did his job right. The fact that the new contract signing was botched in the first place due to the agent's error, and one of our housemates bought a laser thermometer to document how cold the rooms were, sometimes as low as 8 Celsius or 45 Fahrenheit, and had taken pictures of readings, so there was a heavy implication that the house was not suitable for habitation during that time. We haven't received a single email since that, and when the bus goes past the house recently, I see that the letting sign has been changed to a different company, and the house is no longer available through the original agency. So they got fired by the landlords for fucking up so much. I feel smug every time I go past. 2. In 2008, I was stationed overseas and we had a QA personnel and technical evaluation on some equipment on the flight line. Now, the purpose of QA is to ensure that all correct procedures are being done so as not to cause damage to personnel or equipment. But this one Master Sergeant, we'll call him QM, took his role to the extreme. Whenever QM was doing an evaluation, he wrote down every write-up and observation you can think of. Not saying excuse me after we sneeze, slightly wrinkled uniforms, tools too dirty, going 2 miles per hour over the speed limit, his personal favorite, not following protocols. His reasoning for all of these write-ups, to make examples of, so order and discipline is maintained in his Air Force. He not only made our work center a living hell, but all the work centers living hell when he evaluated. We knew what we were in store for this evaluation, so on that night, there were 3 of us instead of 2, the person being evaluated, A1C, a safety observer, SRA, and myself, lead tech. QM arrives to our work center, and he made it clear the minute he walked in. "Morning, gentlemen. The eval has started." AC1 gives his safety brief, and already QM is writing things on his clipboard. But then I noticed he wasn't looking too good. "Are you okay, sir?" "I've had an upset stomach for about an hour or so, but I'm fine." "Sir, if you're not feeling well, we can reschedule for tomorrow." QM mumbles something and then said, "No, mission first." He then writes something down in his clipboard. We head out to the truck and I decide to drive. Normally the lower ranking guys drive, but I didn't want him to get any more write-ups that he didn't deserve. Before we enter the flight line, I stop, and the 3 of us get out to check the tires for rocks, known as an FOD check. QM doesn't get out and stays in the truck. I glance at him, and I see he is writing something down as the rest of us do the FOD check. As we enter the flight line, I start driving about 25, and QM goes off on me, The speed limit here is 15. How do you not know that, being the driver and the lead tech tonight? Sorry, sir, won't happen again. Actually, the speed limit is 20 miles per hour, but when aircraft are parked nearby, the speed limit is reduced to 10 miles per hour. We arrive at the equipment shack, which is behind a locked gate. When you get past the gate, you are no longer on the flight line. This is important for later. A1C gets out to unlock the gate. As we drove in, I see A1C join us and QM scolds him. Why didn't you lock the gates behind us? That's a major security violation. Sorry, sir. SRA goes and locks the gate, but QM stops him. No, he opened the gate, so he has to lock and secure the gates. And when we leave, he has to open the gate as well. AC1 goes and locks the gate, but is not shaken by the comments. 45 minutes into the evaluation, QM is looking pretty bad. But I don't question it. I see AC1 drop his tuning wand, and when I glance at QM, he was writing something but then stops. His face turns red. We need to stop here? I thought A1C did something wrong, that QM is ending the evaluation. But then QM points to me. I need you to take me back to the office ASAP. Yes, sir. Oh, I'm not letting this opportunity slip by. A1C, go ahead and make the equipment safe and take a breather. Don't worry about that, let's go. Sorry, sir. We can't just stop in the middle of an alignment. I need to make sure the equipment is safe before departing. QM is pissed and goes to the truck. A couple of minutes passes and I hear QM blasting the horn. I walk out of the shack and head to the truck, but the gate isn't open yet. Go open the gate and let's go! Sorry, sir. A1C is putting equipment away, and as you said, he's the only one to open the gate. Never mind that! Go! Okay, so I go unlock it just as I see A1C and SRA walk out of the shack. I told them to wait here until I signaled for you. I open the gate, and we exit the area, but I don't move once we're out. Why aren't you moving? Sorry, sir, just waiting for A1C to close the gate, security and all. QM is now rocking back and forth. I look back and signal for A1C to lock the gate, but then I remembered, oh, I have to do an FOD check. I get out of the truck and start checking the tires alone. QM is livid. I get back in and put the car in drive, and moved forward a bit, then stop and put it on park again. What are you doing? I have to do another FOD check after rotating the tires, so I get out and check all the tires again. I get back in and we start heading back to the office. QM is rocking faster now and I can hear weird noises coming from him. Yep, you need to step on it. Sorry, sir, you said the speed limit is 15 miles per hour and I can't go past that. At one point, we are near an apron where there is now a newly parked C-130 that was towed there from the maintenance hangar. So I slow down to 10 miles per hour. Why are you slowing down? Hurry up! Sorry, sir, there is an aircraft parked nearby and, by the rules, the speed limit is reduced to 10 miles per hour. We exited the flight line and are almost near our parking lot when QM yells, "Stop!" Which I do. He gets out of the car and yells at me, "Eval is over for the night!" He then walks ever so slowly towards the parking lot into his car, then drives really slow, leaving the parking lot. Just before I leave that afternoon, my supervisor calls me into his office to ask me what happened. I replay the entire story and he just laughs. Well, he asked for it. I honestly don't know what happened to QM that night, but I can speculate. QM never did another evaluation with our work center after that as well. Edit. So I shared the link to the SRA, now Technical Sergeant E6, and he filled me in on the QA debrief. I was temporary duty stateside for a month and didn't remember to ask when I got back. QM actually attended the debrief and had to put in his comments and observations since he started but couldn't continue due to a personal matter. 1. Safety Observe and lead tech should have been more adamant to not start the eval if they saw the evaluator was in discomfort. 2. A1C should have included in his safety brief that there are no bathrooms anywhere near the equipment shack. 3. While he understands all rules must be followed, in extreme circumstances, he recommends the rules not be completely followed to the letter. 3. This is the story of how I used Pavlovian conditioning to train my formerly obnoxious roommate to behave like a responsible adult. So the 3 of us are nurses and we all live in this company-provided apartment. Each of us has his own room, which is joined by this common area that doubles as the kitchen and dining area. But the walls are paper thin and don't provide enough soundproofing. So, if one were to, say, have loud conversations in the calming area during the late hours of the night, it would resonate through all the rooms adjacent. But if you were in your own room and talking to somebody, it wouldn't be heard outside. Basically, any sound that you make in the common room could be heard in all the rooms. Now, this is not a problem during the day, but at night, when everyone is asleep, our one obnoxious roommate always decides to have his Facebook video calls in the common room, using his phone, waking everyone up with his loud conversations. And since we are nurses, we have to work in shifts. Me and the second roommate work on 12-hour day shifts, 8 a.m. to 8 p.m., while the third obnoxious one works on 12-hour night shifts, 8 p.m. to 8 a.m., so the third roommate tends to be awake at night. We get to sleep soundly when our third roommate has worked. But every time he doesn't have to work, the 2 of us end up being disturbed by his late-night blabbering on his phone. We try to handle it the adult way by talking to him about it, and suggesting he do his antics in his own room since, while in there, we wouldn't hear his loud conversations, and he wouldn't wake us up at night, especially if we have to go to work in the morning. This worked for a while, but he eventually went back to his old habits of waking up at night. We were getting so tired of the situation because all we wanted after a long 12-hour shift was to be able to sleep soundly, especially if we still have to go to work the next day. Our hallelujah came from an episode of The Office that I had just watched, wherein Jim trained Dwight to crave a breath mint every time he restarted his computer. A light bulb suddenly switched on in my head to use our Wi-Fi to train my noisy roommate. Nobody else knew that I had admin privileges. I just happened to be there when the guys installed it and they gave me the key. I realized that I had access to our Wi-Fi network wirelessly on my phone and could turn it on and off on a whim like a god. My MO was simple. Every time I get woken up by the noisy roommate taking his internet calls in the common room, I would turn off the Wi-Fi of the whole house and wait until he goes back to his room before turning it on again. This took months of countless late nights. After getting woken up at night by said roommate, I would wait for an opportune time, usually while he's in deep loud conversation with someone, to turn off the Wi-Fi. Then wait for him to get annoyed and curse our service provider until he finally gives up and goes to his room. Cue for me to turn it back on. The loud late-night calls in the common room became less and less until he no longer took them in the common room at all. This translated to silent nights for me and the second roommate who had to work in the mornings. My method was so effective that he actually thought that there was a problem with his phone. Sometime later he wanted to show me a video of something on his phone, but said that I had to come to his room for him to show me since there was a problem with it, and it wouldn't work in the common room. I was grinning like the devil the whole time. 4. A couple years ago, my wife and I and son moved into a new neighborhood in a small city or large town in the middle of nowhere, Canada. We quickly began to settle into our new place, which had a large backyard with trees, shrubs, flowers, etc. Midway through the summer, I began noticing that tent caterpillars and their silky tents had infested our apple tree. I talked with a couple of locals who informed me that I need to cut off all affected branches and burn them to avoid these pests spreading further and killing my tree, or any other trees nearby. My wife and I did as instructed and proceeded to trim off all the branches and put them in our fire pit, where we use lighter fuel to burn them crispy. We were burning the last of the branches when a grumpy old man, GOM, comes storming into my backyard madder than a hornet.
"What's going on here?"
"Oh hey, we are just burning up some branches from our apple tree. It has tent caterpillars and..."
"Do you have a permit for that fire?"
"No sir, we didn't know we needed one. The last town we lived in, you didn't need any permits for backyard fire pit fires."
Well, you need one and you're breaking the law. Put that out right now or I'm going to call the fire department.
Oh, yes, sorry. I didn't know we needed a permit. We're done burning anyway, so I'll put this out right away. GOM turns around and storms away and heads across the street. I casually watch him to see which house he goes into, so I know which one to avoid in the future. The next day I phone around and discover that you simply need to go down to the local fire hill, pay $10, and register with the fire department to get your permit. It never expires. I proceeded to take the necessary steps, and within 30 minutes, I have my fire permit. You don't actually get a piece of paper or anything. They just put you in their records that you have one. That evening, we invite a couple of our new friends over for a wiener roast and s'mores. About an hour into our hangout, a red pickup truck with the fire department's badge drives down our back alley and stops at our yard.
Hey, you need to put out that illegal fire.
What? It's not illegal, I have a valid permit. I stopped by earlier today and purchased one.
Oh, well, your fire is too smoky and it's bothering your neighbors, so I need you to put it out right now. And if this happens again, you can lose your fire permit permanently.
Okay, sir, whatever you say. I proceeded to put out the fire, but I knew something was up. How did he know I had an illegal fire? Why did he make me put it out anyway? I figured someone must have complained and reasoned that it must have been GOM. I apologized to my friends, finished my hot dog, and proceeded to march over to GOM's house and knocked on the door.
Hello?
Hi, it's me, your neighbor from across the street. The one you chatted with yesterday about the fire.
Oh, hi. What do you want?
At this point, a sweet old lady, SOL, who is GOM's wife, pokes her head around the corner and sees me.
Hi, you must be the new neighbor. Come in, come in.
She ushers us through the house and out onto their back patio and deck where she seats us down.
Can I get you something to eat or drink?
Oh, I'm fine, thank you.
I insist. Let me make you some lemonade.
Sure, that would be nice. She leaves me and GOM sitting alone at a table while she goes and makes us lemonade. I seize the opportunity and decide to confront GOM about this whole fire permit nonsense. Hey, so the fire department stopped by today and made me put out my fire. You wouldn't happen to know anything about that, would you?
Yes, I told you that you needed a permit to have a fire.
Right, that's why I went down to the fire department today and purchased one. But they still told me to put the fire out because it was too smoky and was bothering my neighbors. GOM stammers for a bit, surprised by the fact that I had a valid permit.
Well, the smoke from your fire was terrible. And it was blowing into our house and bothering my wife. She's very sensitive to smoke.
I could tell that he was making this up on the spot, so this is where I hatched my malicious compliance plan. I apologized to GOM for my insensitivity, and made small talk until SOL returned with our lemonades and sat down. With my most sincere I love old lady's face on, I leaned across the table and said, Mrs. SOL, I want to apologize for the fire and the smoke. Mr. GOM told me that smoke bothers you, and I had no idea our fire was causing you so much trouble. At this point, GOM shifts uncomfortably in his chair, and I could tell I had called his bluff.
Whatever do you mean? Your smoke wasn't bothering me in the slightest.
She shoots a dagger of a glare towards GOM.
Don't you worry about me. Your fires are none of my concern.
I apologize one more time with a side glance at GOM, just to drive the point home. Are you sure? Because we want to be good neighbors and we don't have to have fires if they bother you.
Shush that talk. I'm perfectly fine. You and your friends enjoy all the fires you want.
I make eye contact with GOM, who knows he has been thoroughly defeated at his own game. He quickly looks away, hangs his head like a puppy who got caught stealing treats, and mumbles something about wanting to be a good neighbor, at the prompting of his wife. I revel in the power of my malicious compliance victory, and we make small talk and finish our lemonades. I bid farewell to GOM and SOL, and walked back across the street with a huge smile on my face, knowing I would never again receive another fire complaint from GOM. I later found out that GOM used to work for the fire department and was buddies with the fire chief. which explains their odd behavior and quick response to his complaint. 5. So I was working in my first proper job at a big banking firm at age 18, and had integrated myself pretty well into the team both as a worker and as a personality. Now, having been born and having spent my life as a man of pasta descent, I'm not exactly a person you'd call naturally quiet or unsociable. Cross every Italian stereotype you have with a bit of British politeness, and you've essentially arrived at who I am. A little background and context for you fine people listening to this. My job was working in a team that essentially ran administrative checks on clients whose banking policies were maturing or being reinvested in a new policy. After this, you pay the monies out to said clients' accounts or reinvest it into the policy required. Long story short, ensure it's the correct policy, check client details align with those on the system, pay out, and reinvest the monies. However, the large majority of these policies had some kind of administrative issue, the most common being illegible handwriting, which means you must check the details are correct with the client before taking any action. If your 3 looks like an 8 on your sort code or account number, then I need to ring you. Otherwise, I may pay your 50 grand policy to some lucky randomer. When you fully complete and pay out a policy, this is known as one job. Employees within this team were expected to average 30 jobs per day, 5 days a week, and make no more than a maximum of 5 errors per month, as each job error would cost the firm £150 to rectify. I start this particular week full of confidence, happy with my job. I've been performing extremely well recently, surpassing an average 52 jobs a day in the last 2 months, alongside no single error to my name. I walk into the office and take my usual seat, boot up my computer and start chatting to my colleague sat opposite. How did your weekend go, etc. Chit-chat type stuff. At this point, another colleague arrives and joins in our conversation, catching up on things, and we begin having a laugh and just easing into our day. 15 minutes later, MWA arrives. Hey MWA, how was your weekend?
It was okay. Didn't get up to much. How about you?
The conversation continues for about 2 or so minutes before we both crack on as usual. All of this is a standard day as far as things go. Nothing off whatsoever. Fast forward to about an hour before I finish for the day, and I've gone over to talk about a particularly difficult job I'm working on with a senior colleague with more experience. Understandably, I'm over there for a good 15 minutes trying to figure out the difficulties of paying out monies in a POA, proof of attorney case. Those of you who know will understand the sensitivity around stuff of that nature, but I shan't bore the rest of you. I return to my desk to continue, but am swiftly interrupted.
Can I see you in the meeting room now, please?
I'm confused by her tone. Sure. We both enter the meeting room.
Right. You've been talking all day to everybody and now you're not getting enough work done.
Sorry, you heard me. Every time I look up, you're chatting away. And you're even distracting people over in legal now. Nothing to do with our department. Do you know how long you were over there for? I was talking to Kay about... I don't care what you were talking to him about. You were over there for 15 minutes. You could have done 3 jobs in that time. Not good enough. I suggest you finish up today and consider thinking about how you conduct yourself when you come in tomorrow morning. I'm left in stunned silence. That evening I went home. Now, I don't want to lose my job, but at the same time I know I haven't done anything wrong. And the way in which I was spoken to left me feeling really pissed off and hard done by. So I came up with a cunning plan. For the remainder of that week and the following week, I go in, sit quietly, and do my job, exactly as is written in my contract, performing and meeting the required 30 jobs a day. Cut to the Monday, 2 weeks after the original drama. I get pulled into a meeting room again. This time the tone is much friendlier. Yeah, morning there. I just wanted to talk to you about the number of jobs you've turned over recently. Sure, how come? Is there a problem? I don't think I've made any errors, have I? No, it's not that. It's just, you were getting through a lot more jobs before, but it seems to have dipped. Oh? I know I've been doing 30 a day. I've been keeping track, it helps me. Yes, but you were doing 52 before. Yeah, I suppose. Odd. I've been focusing on not distracting anyone, though. You must have noticed I'm not talking to people anymore. The penny drops. Okay, thanks. I'll see if I can get through a couple more jobs in a day. I walk out of the meeting room and back to my desk. Needless to say, we had another meeting the following day where, surprise, surprise, I was informed that as long as I didn't take the piss and continued to exceed my job target, I could go back to being sociable again. Exactly how it was before this whole fiasco. Funny that. Also, I discovered she'd been forced to ask me about the job number drop-off, because her manager had given her shit for suddenly having 22 less jobs fulfilled a day over the course of those 2 weeks. 6. So last week my computer starts crashing. It crashes when I start. It crashes when I do anything, typically within 10 to 15 minutes of powering on. I raise an IT request for it, as is protocol. While the request is assigned, I do a few sanity checks on my own, just to be able to gain any additional information which could help them out. I figure that these are not workstation computers for which they have spare parts, and I should probably help them out because I was one of the people who badgered them into getting these machines for us in the first place. Almost immediately I noticed that the CPU isn't being cooled, and I traced it back to a faulty pump in the water cooling setup that we had, or a faulty seal around the pipe that goes to the pump. There was a leak, and all the liquid had evaporated or leaked away and dried. Now, I'm no expert on water cooling for PCs by any stretch, but it was quite clear that nothing was being cooled. So when the IT guy came by, I told him it was probably something to do with the water cooling pump, as the CPU is running really hot. IT guy tells me that I shouldn't have been poking in there myself, but he appreciates the help nonetheless. He takes the computer and passes it off to his dumbass boss, DB from now, the person who checks faulty hardware before making a decision. DB is livid. He tells the first guy what I told him is meaningless, and to let the professionals handle it. Okay. DB comes to the same conclusion about the pump himself after wasting a day. It's after this that it all gets really weird. So to ensure that I could continue my work, I get another computer assigned to me. It's one of the normal workstation PCs that they have. But I'm not really complaining, I get how it is. I start raising IT requests for software installation so that I can at least have everything that I know works on these machines, and get some work done. Some of the software works, and I'm able to continue my work, even though it's in a very limited capacity. 2 days pass like this, and I never heard back from IT about my computer. I asked DB about any progress, and he informs me that they themselves didn't have any water cooling parts in the office, so they had to go to the vendor they bought the computer from for it. And that the vendor said it would take 3 to 4 weeks to procure said part. I was speechless. It's just a dumb water cooler. Even if they had to find a replacement, surely they could find a compatible replacement within days. At that moment, I thought maybe DB had asked for the exact model and make of the part, which may or may not be available, since these things go in and out of stock all the time. What followed was this exchange. We don't need the exact same model if that's what you've asked the vendor for. Anything compatible with the CPU should work. And we could probably get a new one faster.
Who's a technician here? Don't lecture me about compatibility. This isn't your personal computer, it's company property.
The guy says 1 month. I can't not work for 1 month.
We haven't closed your request. Go back and log your project time with the request ID. Leave the actual diagnostics and repairs to the actual technicians.
Needless to say, I was pretty pissed at that. But I decided to follow his instructions to the letter. I have since started logging my time as system down with the request ID for my original ticket. I come into work, do what I can on this replacement computer, and I chill for the rest of the day. This is going to raise a lot of eyebrows when IT requests are tallied at the end of the month, and I'm looking forward to it. Till then, it's been 1 week, and I'm looking forward to 2 or 3 more of these. At least till DB decides to at least give my suggestions some thought and not chase after the exact same part. Update. The first choke point in the workflow is here. There is a client review on Friday, and usually we can get multiple reviews going on my colleagues' computers and mine. But it just so happens that my colleague has a different project assigned to him, and since my computer is unavailable, they've had to agree to outfit an older workstation with Windows 10, all Oculus drivers, etc., all in one day, to be able to still host the client at our office. Update 2. They were not able to get the computer ready in time on Friday. I have to leave early due to a personal emergency, so I missed the actual fallout. Still logged in my 4 hours as system down, talked to the IT guy who helped me out with the tickets and following up with the entire ordeal. And according to him, they are supposed to come up with a solution by Friday. My computer still isn't here yet, so I guess the solution is to wait. 7. Many moons ago, back when smartphones didn't exist yet, I managed a major fast food restaurant in Florida. As many of you know, Florida is where you go to visit if you want to be eaten alive by bugs, alligators, snakes, etc. So in addition to doing basic managerial tasks at my store, I've also been known to help out with the odd pest problems like throwing venomous spiders outside and removing snakes from the premises, but nothing too insane. Well, one day my bosses sold all of their restaurants to a man who we'll call IB, Idiot Boss. I rarely saw him because he was a very hands-off kind of boss, and I generally liked him because he didn't enforce a bunch of ridiculous rules like my previous bosses did. And he understood that I knew how to run that store. If I ever needed anything, I would just call him to let him know, and he would usually just tell one of the workers from a sister store to go help me with whatever I needed help with. He avoided going to his stores like the plague. But one day, out of the blue, he showed up. Normally, he'd only stop by after midnight once the store was closed, and he only did that about once a week. He was just there to deal with some paperwork that he didn't get around to doing the night before. No big deal. And I was helping a customer that had just walked in. My sweet customer informed me that he had seen a flying ant on our front door when he walked in. I thanked him for letting me know, and told him that I'd look into it. After I got done helping my customer, I went to go check out the ant. But there were now 2 flying ants on the outside of the door. Uh-oh. That's how swarms always start. 1 is fine, it might go away. 2 is bad because the first one liked the door so much that it told its buddy about it. So I went back inside and told IB to call pest control because there were 2 out there. And there were about to be a lot more. IB laughed because I was scared of some ants outside. He thought I wasn't afraid of anything, and it's true. I'm not afraid of some flying ants. I know they can fly, and I know they can bite. But I don't like being dismissed like that. I don't needlessly tell people to do things. I told him again that he needed to call pest control, and he told me not to worry about it as long as they weren't inside. Cue malicious compliance. On his way out the door, he made a point to tease me again because there were only 4 out there. I laughed politely and waved goodbye to him. Over the next few days, more and more flying ants showed up. They really liked that door for some reason. It got to the point there were a good few hundred on it. Now, as I'm sure you can imagine, I wasn't worried about them because, like IB said, they weren't inside the store. Once it hit around day 4 of the swarm, customers almost completely stopped coming in, with the exception of some brave lawn care guys, and a pest control guy who left me his card. My customers didn't want to get bitten, and I didn't blame them. Then on day 5, manager from one of the sister stores popped in to grab some food that their store had run out of. She was stunned by how many ants there were. I shrugged, and told her that I told IB already. But she still decided to call him, and she told me that there were now hundreds of flying ants. I don't know exactly what he said to her, but I do remember that after that phone call, she pointed out that he never listens to the female managers. I think she may have been right about that, but that's a story for another day. I said goodbye to her as she exited through the back door, and she told me to enjoy doing nothing for the rest of my shift. Eventually, the boss came back to the store for his once-a-week visit, which was in the middle of the night because that was normal for him. And he must have had a conniption because he called me as soon as I walked into the store that following morning. He was so mad, but not at me. He went on a huge rant about how there must be something wrong with Florida, and how he lost so much money due to customers not coming in. He asked me if I'd be okay working half a day, and I said sure. He called pest control and they solved the problem the next day. He also got more hands-on with the stores after that and listened to me a little better, which was nice. 8. Zitri here. I'm an senior developer. This story is from the times when I climbed the ladder to become a senior for the first time in the energy industry in my country. Summer was coming. Despite my several attempts to delay a GIS, Geographical Information Systems, roughly mapping the assets and values for other integrations project, my project manager decided it was the best time to collect data in the most rainy season in a rural area. The upper management was on the move, seeking a head for the chopping block to pay for the inefficiency of the project and the money lost for nearly useless data. You can't ask for efficiency from a worker when he's under heavy rain with a thick layer of mud on the ground and GPS spewing nonsense. What can I say? I had warned them. I was a hard-working developer. I loved to code. I'd often do overtime without asking for anything in return, training myself about the new technologies and do everything within my power to ease the job of the field crew. You know, the best candidate to be blamed. It all started when I started to take my annual leave for an early holiday near the sea. A well-respected comrade from another branch called me and asked for a rush job about a detailed data migration. I reached the people at the branch, spoke to the management, promised I'd do whatever is possible, and spent nearly 40 hours non-stop in front of the computer at home, finishing the migration. When I got back from the holiday, surprise! My project manager wanted to speak to me. He asked me where I was for the last 2 days before my holiday. It was weird, because he was CC'd the mail exchange and he actually knew. I told him I had worked on the migration non-stop. He was having none of it. Work had to be done at the workplace. Company lawyer got called. I got asked for a statement about my absence. I can't tell you how pissed I was. I clearly mentioned it was company policy allowing coders working from home in emergencies. The VPN records and the job done easily showed I did more work than I was supposed to during those 2 days. The response to my statement was a new rule, disallowing coders from working anywhere but at the office during usual office hours. I calmly headed to the HR, told them I was taking back my permission to be assigned overtime at all. In my country's laws, a written permission of the worker must be taken before he can be assigned overtime legally. When asked about the reason, I told what happened and said I would never even work a minute outside my hours again. I also started taking much more care about the breaks and started using every single second of them. Off the record, demoralized as I was, I didn't give my 100% to the job anyway. I also dusted off my CV and started looking for a new job. Thankfully, this was a right decision by me. In my contract, I had agreed to traveling for business reasons. I also had a 4-year-old daughter, another 6-month-old daughter, and we had started living in that city for that job, so we didn't have familiar folks to look after my wife. My project manager's next step was assigning me to a meter replacement project in another city. This was bull droppings. Anything that required coding I could easily do from where I was, and my responsibilities in the main branch sometimes required me to be physically there, especially meetings. When I asked for how long I was assigned there, the project manager grinned like the idiot he is and said, "For the time being." 2 people can play the game of contracts and laws. Our labor laws clearly indicate if a worker is assigned a job outside his city, the weekly commute should be done during office hours. So I got even happier when I learned that the project manager decided, because the job isn't urgent, I was supposed to go by train or bus, not an aeroplane. First week I got the train at 9 a.m., managing to get to the branch office by roughly 4:30 p.m. Day done? Day done. On Friday I left the office roughly at 10:30 a.m., so if they want me to work only 3 days a week, who am I to refuse? I should confess I started working at roughly 10% of my capacity during that week. I was getting very nice responses from the defense sector in my country, and I was confident I could land a job a few days after I got fired. The project manager simply couldn't back down and assign me back to the main branch, so I spent 3 weeks in another city working roughly 3 days a week. During that time, Our labor laws clearly declare that one worker can't be singled out about break times if people of the same level are in similar behavior. Because a senior developer there simply didn't care about breaks and clock in and out times, I followed his example. He was untouchable with good connections to the upper management. They couldn't punish him, so they couldn't punish me. I remember once having a nearly 5-hour lunch break with him to eat fish in a fancy restaurant with the view of Bosphorus. That senior developer was also a very heavy smoker and coffee addict. Once an hour he'd call me outside to accompany him to have coffee and to smoke. Later he said he was supposed to look over my shoulder and check my job. He couldn't care less. He'd instead sit in my room for hours at a time speaking about times past, our families, office gossip, anything but the job itself. I was kindly asked to quit. But it was past my second year in that company. That meant that they were supposed to pay me roughly 3 months' pay as severance, then roughly another 2 months as notice if they wanted to fire me instantly. There was absolutely no recording in that meeting, so I calmly explained I'd keep on my 3-day relaxed weekly shifts until they fired me. During my 4th week, I was called to the project manager's room and got fired with my severance and penalty for the notice. 15 minutes after I left the office, I accepted my new job. The project in the branch office got completed successfully, mostly because there was no need for a developer there at all. The project manager didn't get fired, he just got demoted to engineer. I don't know what happened then. The company is still alive and well, so I believe the upper management revised their policies. Hopefully I never have to mess with such a manager again in my life. 9. Way back in the early 2000s, I worked at a Blockbuster Videos in the UK. It wasn't my first job, but I was still in high school when I started, so it was near as damn it. I had a pretty good working relationship with my boss and quickly moved up the ranks to one of the deputy managers. I was the person the manager would call to cover shifts, and honestly, unless I had a really good reason, I always did the extra because I actually really liked the job. I'm a film nerd, so I loved spending my working days talking to customers about movies. It also didn't hurt that I could rent any movie at any time for free. So this one particular Saturday we were slammed. 3 staff members called in sick. We had a big new release movie that week, and we had a big computer game release on the Friday too, so it was manic. Halfway through my shift, a guy comes in and says he bought a game the week before from the store and that he wanted a refund. He said I had served him, but I hadn't given him a receipt. Now, I did remember serving the guy, but couldn't remember what he bought, and frankly, even though it's automatic to give receipts, I couldn't guarantee I had. The problem was that specific game was the only copy we apparently had. Our inventory said it was in store, but this guy had it, so somehow it had left the store without being processed. Either it had been stolen by this guy, it was some kind of error on my part, or I had actively given it to him and pocketed the money. To be clear, these are options from an objective POV. I never stole from that job, so I definitely didn't do the last. My manager was working with me, so he refunded the guy, took the game back, and then, for the rest of the shift, didn't speak to me once. As we closed the store that night, the manager took me into the office and proceeded to accuse me of stealing. Without evidence, he said that I stole the game and pocketed the money. I obviously denied the claim. Things got heated, and it ended with him telling me to hand in my notice. 2 weeks, so I did. I was heartbroken because I loved the job and I knew I was innocent. I may have given it by accident, but I would never knowingly steal. So 2 weeks later, my notice period is up, and on my last shift, coincidentally, the area manager comes in. Now, I had quite a good relationship with the AM. I'd been hired by them originally, and it was frequently noted by them that I always seemed to be on shift when they came in. They asked me how I was, and they said that I was sad that I was leaving. They didn't know this, so asked why. I explained the situation, and they immediately went to the office. Half an hour later, I got a call to go to the office. The AM was sat with the CCTV footage for the day the man said he'd bought the game. In the video, it showed me serving him, then as he left, he had a chat with the store manager. No sound on the CCTV, but they were clearly chatting. The manager was working in new inventory, ready to put out on the shelf. For some reason, the manager turned his back on the customer for a few moments, and as plain as day, the customer reached over the counter, grabbed something, and left. The AM assumed this was the game. Well, the manager was called in. He was first asked why I had given in my notice, when the accusation against me deserved a meeting with the AM and my immediate dismissal if I was guilty. The manager just stuttered something about not wanting to make a big deal. Then the AM asked the manager to explain what happened in the CCTV after showing it. The manager just sat there quietly. Well, anyway, the AM asked me at this point to rescind my notice, which I did, though I cannily asked for a few days extra paid holiday because I felt embarrassed by the theft situation, and the AM agreed. The AM then said they would be taking the month's worth of CCTV footage to have it looked over, because this act of negligence by the manager was a cause for concern. The blood ran from the manager's face at this point, but nothing further was said. I finished my shift and walked out with the AM to enjoy my week off. 3 days later, I got a phone call from the AM asking if I could meet with him at the store that day. I obliged. When I arrived, the AM took me to the office and told me there had been a situation. During the CCTV checks, it had become apparent that the manager had been using the store for other reasons. On a number of nights over the course of a month, he'd closed the store, then after the staff had gone, he'd invited people in. One night he'd held a poker game in the staff room. Later found out he'd been using the money from the tills to cover his losses and putting through refund notices to cover it. And on 3 other occasions, he was seen bringing in women to have sex within his office. Now, the women were known prostitutes in the area. The manager was also married. Well, the manager was automatically suspended while there was an investigation, and the reason I was brought in was to be asked to run the store in his absence. After the investigation was complete, it turned out the manager had been giving hundreds of pounds of refunds per month, and falsifying who gave the refunds so it didn't look suspicious. This had gone on for years in multiple stores that he'd worked in. So, because he accused me of something I didn't do, he lost his job. And his marriage. His wife obviously wasn't impressed by the prostitutes. And I got a promotion with a lovely raise. 10. I'm not exactly proud of this because I can kind of see where the customer came from. But I think those of you who have dealt with condescending customers before can appreciate it for what it was. So I supervised a mom-and-pop restaurant for several years that dealt specifically with shrimp and fish. Outside of cleaning and prepping the stuff, the main deal was cooking it in several big ol' fryers. It involved work, but it's not hard work. Just stick the basket of food in the fryer and set a timer for 3 minutes. And when it comes out, just bag it up and give it to the customer. Easy work. Though it gets a bit complicated on, let's say, a busy day like Friday, where we do anywhere between $1,000 to $1,300 during a 6-hour shift, or maybe $1,500 to $1,700 if it was really busy. See, that's a normal busy Friday. When it's Lent season, business would boom significantly, like we do 5,000 to 7,000 during the Friday shifts, so yeah, busy. When it's that busy, you can't exactly rely on timers as much, because there's so much food going in and out of the fryers, the temperature fluctuates, so you gotta eyeball it. I'll have food burning at 2.5 minutes, or some food taking up to 4 minutes to look right. So here's where the malicious compliance comes in. During a Lent Friday night dinner rush, we'll get hundreds of people coming into a shop that's probably smaller than a middle-class living room. I'm talking like the waiting area on the other side of the counter was probably 20 feet by 7 feet, so it can get pretty cramped. I have my register person taking orders and making bags, and pushing them along the line, while my wait table people can weigh out the food so I can start cooking them. When the order is done, I shove it in a bag and yell the name of the order, and someone in the crowd will grab it and be on their way. It's a very intimate setup. So I got a counter full of about 20 plus bags, each bag with a different order, and this one bag gets to me, and it said, "Cook shrimp an extra minute," or something to that effect. Now, like I said, the fryers cook funny when there's that much food going in and out, so using my years of shrimp frying experience, I extrapolate in my head what the food should look like if cooked for that long under normal conditions, and cook it until it looks like that. I pull up the food and hear an from behind me, and I look. And this lady apparently followed her back down the line, waited for me to drop the food, and set her own timer. She said with a shitty gotcha attitude while looking at her own timer,
"Yeah, you need to cook that for an extra 45 seconds.
At this point her food was already looking too done, but she interrupted my flow and gave me an attitude, so I blurted out, "Oh, okay," and set a timer for 45 seconds and put it on the counter. I bagged some other people's food, and I hear the lady behind me again, apparently with a little less teeth to her words this time.
I think it's done now."
And I grabbed my timer that I had set right in front of her, looked at it, and yelled with an equally condescending gotcha attitude, "Oh, but you still have 17 seconds left," and smacked it down and waited until the timer went off. 17 seconds can feel like a long time in those kinds of situations. Finally, the timer went off. I grabbed her food. It looked burnt. I bagged it up and gave it to her and said, "Here you go, miss. Enjoy the rest of your day." She muttered a thank you and walked off, and my co-workers and customers had a little laugh about it. Never got a complaint. Now, don't get me wrong, I get it. As a customer, I can be finicky sometimes too. But the problem was, I was honoring her request, but in a way she didn't understand because there's a bunch of variables at play that only an experienced fryer cook would get. I feel bad, but at the same time, I don't appreciate anyone giving me an attitude, and I've never been a customer who's always right kind of person anyways. Hey everybody, Hellfreezer here, and thank you very much for listening to the Revenge's Ice Cream Archives number 12. And thank you very much to everybody who allowed me to use their stories. Finally, after weeks, literally weeks of preparation, moved into the new office, set up, needs a bit of work. I've got some work, well, the ceiling has no treatment at all, so I need to do that. And I'll probably slap some extra foam, although I don't like it, it does help, on the gaps in between the walls, apart from the one wall that's going to get painted green, but it feels so good to have it done. Just a few bits and bobs I've got to take care of in other areas of the house before my partner comes for a visit. But those bits won't take long at all. And that's all good. Working and recording in this space, there were some initial problems where I realized I had my desk facing the wrong way. I had it facing the wall, which was causing... I didn't like the way it sounded. So I turned it around facing into the room, and it actually is less echoey doing it that way, which makes sense because that was the setup I had when I was recording in my bedroom. But now I feel more professional, which is good. And with that, I'm going to head off for now. So until next time, thank you very much for listening, and take very good care of yourself.